I think people that have kind of an awareness of the world around them, I think daily we examine ourselves and as we should, and we should always be asking ourselves, is this the best we can be, or can we be better?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the great fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I really appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. Before I begin my interview with Randall Standridge, I just want to take a moment to thank all of you who came to the 2018 Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic and found me and told me how much you're enjoying the show. There were several of you that came up to me and talked to me about it, and you mentioned how much you enjoy it and how it's a great thing, and you encouraged me to keep going with it. And it really means a lot because I do this from the basement of my home, and I don't make any money from it really. And it's really just my sort of passion to do this, to give back to the community and to do something for all of you who are listening. And so I really, really appreciate the kind words, and I want to thank all of you who saw me and thank all of you who are listening from the bottom of my heart. Have a happy new year, and I wish you nothing but the best in 2019. And now on to my next guest, composer Randall Standridge. Hi, Randall.
Hey, Mark.
Randall, thanks so much for doing this. I know that I caught you at Midwest, and we kind of scheduled the time there. I'm really happy that we could make it work.
Oh, me too, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's an honor for me. So, Randall, can you introduce yourself for my listeners and tell everyone what you're doing right now?
Sure. Well, as most of your listeners will know, I'm a composer, and that's actually my full-time job right now. I am a freelance composer, I basically do this, year-round, this in addition to marching band design. But I actually started as a music educator. After leaving high school, I went to high school in Sheridan, Arkansas, not far from Little Rock, which is actually where I lived. I went to Arkansas State University and got my music education degree. But while I was there, I was also studying composition on the side with Dr. Tom O'Connor, just because I was interested in it. And in particular, at the time, I was really interested in arranging for marching band. So we had two teachers at the college, which were Dr. Jared Spears and Dr. Tom O'Connor. And I was assigned to Dr. O'Connor because Dr. Spears was the main composition person, and also Dr. O'Connor had more experience with marching band. So I was assigned to him and just, took lessons on the side, and he was very, very encouraging. As was Dr. Spears. They were both very encouraging. And they, thought I had a lot of talent. But, of course, at the time, my sights were pretty much set on being a band director. So I went through the music education program, graduated, and got a job in Harrisburg, Arkansas, which is a really small school. And in that situation, I was the band director. And what I mean by that is I was the only band director for grades 6 through 12. So I taught the beginning band, I taught the middle school band, and I taught the high school band. And during that time, I did a lot of writing for my band because my band was really good. It was just small. During that time, I was also doing a lot of marching band design. So I was really getting to cut my teeth on a lot of musical genres at once. Because I had my clientele grew pretty quickly because people seemed to like what I was doing, both in terms of music and drill. And so the upswing of that was, I'd have several clients. So on any given year, I would be writing classical music for the field. I'd be writing Broadway music, rock music, country music, pretty much you name it, plus original compositions, which, had kind of at that time just started to come into vogue for marching band. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but it was a tremendous training ground for becoming, a composer, because it was just all of these genres all through at once, and it was super high pressure because you had to just produce really quickly. So I did that for a while, and then I just started writing more for concert band and got a few things published. And then a piece I wrote, or two pieces I wrote, one called Afterburn and the other one called Adrenaline Engines, just kind of took off. And after that, it really put me on a lot of people's radar. And it got to where I basically just needed to make a decision between teaching and composing, because there just wasn't time for both, and for me to have a personal life. And so I just made the decision to compose for a while. But now, having said that, if the opportunity to go back to teaching ever arose, and like if I wasn't composing anymore, I would happily do that, because I loved teaching. And it definitely influenced my progress and ideas as a composer, especially a composer for educational music. And so, I did that, and then I moved to freelance composing and marching band design, and here we are. That's what I do now.
Mm-hmm. So, Randall, there's a lot in there that's you left unsaid. So do you mind if I untangle some of that?
Sure, absolutely.
So can you talk to me about your early years? Like, did you come from a musical family, and what instrument do you play?
I come from a musical family, but not in the sense of like classically trained.
Mm-hmm.
Music is just a big part of my family. In particular, my dad's side of the family. I had several uncles that, played guitar, fiddle, banjo, things like that. We're definitely a Southern family. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people sang. And so it was pretty natural to be around music all the time in that family. And then, I've got two brothers, and my oldest brother really loves to sing. And he would just teach me all kinds of songs when I was little. And then my, middle brother, Scott, is more of a instrumentalist. He played guitar, played a few other things. And so he would show me instrument stuff, and he's the one that actually got me started on piano, which was my first instrument. Although I didn't read music, I just played totally by ear. And then I eventually got into band and got in percussion, which, was a pretty good fit, since I had at least some idea of xylophones and things like that, since they were set up like pianos. So that was kind of how I got started in music, was just through, family exposure, and then through a band program at Sheridan.
Sure. How about high school or middle school band directors or teachers? Do you have anyone that you look back and really remember being really important?
Oh, well, to me, it's all of them. I've been very lucky to maintain a really good relationship with what I would call my band directing family. My very first band director was a gentleman named Doug West, who was the director at Sheridan at the time, and just a really nice guy. And I really enjoyed his class. So I get to see him occasionally. Not super often, but just occasionally. And then the three that I would say really had a huge impact on me were my directors, Ron McCone, who was my first junior high director, but then moved to the high school, and so was my high school director my entire time there. And then two other gentlemen, Michael Ferguson and Chris Lacera, who were middle school and assistant directors, but all three of them were very involved with all the students at Sheridan, and so they all had a huge, huge impact on me. In particular, I'll say Mr. Ferguson and Mr. McCone were very encouraging, even from my early years, about my desire to compose, because I was composing in high school. I was writing music. It wasn't anything like what I do now. But, I'd write, like a drumline cadence, or I'd write a xylophone solo or something like that, and they'd look at it and they'd give me some feedback. So it was a really positive environment for learning to be a musician and learning to continue musicianship past high school.
Yeah, and so that has sort of piqued my interest a little bit when you say that. And other composers have talked about teachers who fostered their creativity from a young age. And so in what ways were they encouraging you, or in what ways did they set you up to write music as a high school student? Well,
first of all, the first thing I'd say is that, like at Sheridan, we were not I would not have called us a super competitive band. Like, we weren't one of the ones that were our goals to win everything. The big thing was to have fun and to enjoy music. But at the same time, there was a very, very high expectation of excellence and practicing. So, the first thing I would say is that I just got a really good musical background. I was musically literate. because, I mean, Mr. McCone would and Mr. Ferguson would teach us some theory in class. I mean, it wasn't like, super heavy duty theory, but it was just, like we learned the circle of fifths, we would learn, how to build chords and things like that. And all of that, definitely helps. So just from a sheer, being musically literate and being able to understand everything, that was, a huge foundation. And then beyond that, I know, like, for when I was one of the section leaders for the drum line, and Mr. Ferguson would allow me to, write cadences, write things, adjust things. So I would tweak and adjust music for everybody, or write cadences and things. And that's it. And then, like Mr. McCone, we never played anything of mine in band. And that was probably for the best, because looking back, like, the stuff I was writing at the time was just not very good. I definitely benefited from learning about the instruments and stuff in college. But he would give me feedback. Like, I'd bring things in and he'd be like, well, this is good, but you might want to do this. And so there was this, the big thing is I was never told no, and I was never told, oh, well, this is not something that you should be doing. It was always just kind of like, okay, well, if you're interested in this, let's, learn how to do it a little bit better. And so it was just this kind of what I would call quiet encouragement, just that they didn't make it sound impossible. They're like, oh, yeah, if you want to do this, you can totally do this,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that keeps coming up in the podcast is the idea of having high expectations. And you mentioned that from your teachers. And I think that it's really important. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's important for everybody in whatever they do. My philosophy about life in general is very excellence-based. So, whether it's my composing or my marriage or the way I treat people, my expectations for myself are very high, and consequently my expectations for other people are very high too. But I think that has benefited me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say it's usually a benefit, but every now and then I know that I have the same thing where sometimes I judge people against a standard that is my own and not necessarily theirs, and sometimes that could cause me problems.
Well, no, I mean that's fine. It's because I don't think you're necessarily judging people when you have that standard, but you are making decisions about what you will tolerate in your life. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that,
So Randall, can you tell me a little bit about after high school, sort of going to Arkansas State, and then about getting your first job and what that was like for you?
Well, I mean, going to Arkansas State, I'll just be honest. The biggest reason I went there, I mean, I'd been introduced to the music program, and it was a good music program. But the big thing was that I had been offered a full scholarship there because of my ACT scores. And so it was the only college in the state that had offered me, like, where I wouldn't have to pay anything. And I mean, my parents, are very hard workers and everything, but there wasn't just a lot of extra money for them to pay for me to go to college. And it was, I mean, I could have supported myself, of course. I mean, I've been happy to, get a job and do that at work. But just the idea that I could actually totally focus on my studies and not have to worry about holding down job, while I was trying to learn all this stuff, that was obviously very appealing. And so, I just took that and got a full ride to Arkansas State and went up there. And, looking back, it was probably the best decision I made. Though for different reasons, because, I mean, the A-State program was really, really strong, and still is, but at the time, it kind of gave me everything I needed as far as, being a good educator and being a good composer, because I can't imagine, like, studying with anybody else besides Dr. Connor would have given me the ability to do, commercial composing, artistic composing, marching band arranging, and things like that. And so, I mean, my college experience was very, very happy. I mean, it was a good time in my life. I got a great education. I met my future husband there. And so, it was a good experience.
I asked you about that first job. And so marching is very important to you. It seems to have been an important part of your musical education, and it still is as the marching band editor for Grand Mesa. So can you tell me about that first job, and maybe we can then talk a little bit about marching band music?
Oh, yeah. And, the first job I got, like I said, it was at Harrisburg, Arkansas, and this program was a pretty unique situation, or well, maybe it's not, but maybe but it seemed unique to me. The Harrisburg had the several years before I began my tenure as the director there. If you want to do this math real quick, they had 5 directors in the 3 years before I got there. So you can see already the program was in severe disrepair. When I first got hired, like after I'd signed my contract, the high school band had 5 kids in it. The beginning band had 1 student in it. Because the director the year before had left for health reasons halfway through the year, and the school had not hired anybody to fill the spot. So there was no recruiting going on, no anything. I mean, this program, like, if you could just imagine, like, the worst situation, this was pretty close to it. But, I mean, at the time, honestly, it was the only job I could find. There were not a lot of openings in the area. And, Steve already had a job, so we couldn't really move. So, I just pretty much had to, I had to have a job. And so I took this job, and fortunately, the administration really wanted a good band. There's no nice way to say this. The problem was just the directors before me had just been completely incompetent. And I mean, like, for instance, Mark, did you know there's such a thing as a left-handed trombone?
I suppose it's possible.
I didn't until I took that job. And I mean, that's just one small example, but I'll let that stand for the rest. But anyway, the administration really and the community, really wanted a good band. And so, they allowed me to recruit the first week, and I've got the list of all the students who had ever been in band for the past several years, just to try to build some type of program. And we were able to get, I think we ended up with about 15 to 20 kids in the high school band. I forget exactly how many that first year. And then in the beginning band, I think we ended up with about 20. By the time all was said and done. They hadn't even had a marching band for 5 years. It was just, it was just like the, worst band situation you can imagine. So my first goal was to get the program going. So we did a marching band that year. We did like 10 drill sets, really, really easy music, and just got them on the field so that, the town would know, hey, we've got a band again. And so we did it. The first year was good. We went to a concert festival that year too. And the one thing I will say too about these kids, the kids at Harrisburg were fantastic. Again, the problem was not the kids. They'd just been taught poorly, but they were very eager and ready to learn. And so just that first year, we went to concert festival and achieved a Division II rating, which, I mean, considering the last time that band had gone to festival, they'd gotten straight 5s. I was pretty pleased with the 2. Like I was, to me, that was like getting gold, And anyway, to make a long story a little bit shorter, the next year, we had a little bit of experience on our belt, and I was like, okay, this year we're going to go to a marching contest. So I designed it, a good show for us, made sure it fit the group that I had. We had one really good trumpet player and one really good saxophone player. I made sure I showed them off. And, everybody else, we had achieved pretty good tone. So I was like, okay, we're going to do some rhythmic stuff with them, but really show off these 2. And we kind of based the whole show around that. We went to our first contest, and I don't know how they do it in most states. Like in Arkansas, and I think in a lot of southern states, when you go to a contest and they call out ratings, they'll call out like all the Division IIs first and then all the Division Is. Well, my goal with this contest, was again, hopefully we'll just get a 2. So they called out all the Division II ratings, and they got to where we should have been, and they skipped us. And so I was a little devastated. I was like, all right, well, we got a 3, so we'll improve from here and move on towards the next contest. And then they started calling out the Division Is, and we got straight 1s all the way across the board. Keeping in mind, this was with 10 wind players, 4 percussionists, and 4 color guard. And we did that, and so we're like, oh yeah, this is great. But then they started calling all the other awards, and we totally swept our class. And what was funny was the kids were, they had never been to a contest. Like, this was their first contest right out of the gate. And so they were just like, Mr. Standridge, is that good? Like, we don't know. I mean, really, they had no idea. And so we just, we did that and had a pretty good year, and it just built from there. And the program began, to grow a little bit. And the musicianship got, better and better. And within like 4 years, we were basically the band to beat. especially for our size, but even amongst some of the larger classes too. And so it was just this rapid improvement. And again, it was just, the students were really eager to learn, and they really responded well to good instruction.
Yeah, so I'm looking at a map here of Harrisburg. There's only 2,000 people in the town. How big was the high school?
Yeah, it is small. I mean, the school, I think the high school and middle school together was around 500 to 600 students. So not very big. I mean, really, really small town. Fortunately, I will say, the one big positive is, we were right beside Jonesboro, which is a college. That's where Arkansas State is.
Sure.
So there was at least a little opportunity for that college influence. But now, having said that, I mean, Harrisburg, we're talking about, Title I school, 100% free and reduced lunch, median household income, $17,000. So, it was a very, very poor situation. But the big positive I'll say about, the community, the administration, and the kids were they really wanted excellence. And we just did whatever it took to get it. And so my time there I had a good run there. I was there for 12 years, and I did my entire band directing career there, and it was a happy situation for I mean, granted, you've always got those moments where you're not quite as happy as you'd like to be. But I think that's with any job. So,
all right, Randall. So, one of the things that makes you special as a composer to me is that just what we talked about. You've been a band director. You did it for a long time. And there's sort of a tradition in the band community of composers coming from the band director ranks. And one of the things I want to talk about before we talk about your music is maybe if there's someone out there who's listening who might be the future Randall Standridge, what advice might you give them if they're teaching right now?
Well, the big thing would be, I mean, composing really takes time. Composing well especially takes time. And so, the first thing I would say is, I mean, if you want to be a composer, or if you are a composer, you have that, drive and that compulsion to write music, just make time for it. Because typically people, like me, because, hopefully everyone knows that Mark is a composer as well. People like us, it's not so much. I mean, I never get up and just say, "Oh, I'm doing this for God." There's just a part of my personality that makes me want to write.
Yeah, sure.
And so I would just, and it makes me happy to write. To someone out there like that, I would say, first of all, do it because it makes you happy, and it'll be a good, source of joy and stress relief and creativity in your life. Kind of break up the humdrum of the teaching day. And then the second thing is, I would say, I think in being in a band directing position, your whole life is, or not your whole life, but a big part of your life is score study. So, I mean, every day, if you're picking good music for your kids, then that should definitely influence you as a composer. Because, you as directors, we are digesting the same musical diet that our students are. And so if we're asking them to play junk, we're being influenced by junk. And if we're playing good music, we're being influenced by good music. So I think repertoire selection, both in terms of, making you a better musician and making you a better composer, is going to be really important for that. So, that's what I say. And then the last thing I would say, though, is do not always use your band as a lab band, because if you do, you're only going to write for the same ability level all the time. And I think to be a really successful composer in today's market and in today's social media world, I think you need to be able to write at multiple levels. I mean, for instance, I write from grade 1 all the way up to grade 6. And I am very happy writing at any of those levels. And there's other composers that are the same way now. You've got Brian Dalages, who very successfully writes for all levels. And same thing, Jolie Giroux. And you got John Mackey, who started to write some younger band stuff. So I think it's good to get outside of the box of your band and be able to write at multiple levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good advice. So, Randall, I had Walter Cummings, who's the owner of Grand Mesa Music, on last year around this time. And, of course, you have a long association with Grand Mesa. And he mentioned that he met you at an Arkansas MEA. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was at the Arkansas Bandmasters Association convention.
Can you tell the story of how you got your first success, or when success started coming to you as a composer?
Well, I actually had some pieces published before Grand Mesa. There's a small publication company based in Arkansas called Twin Towers Music. They published my first works, and the owner, Brian Rhodes, is very nice and very encouraging. So, I wrote a few things for them. Although, definitely, if any of you out there go out and seek out those pieces, you will definitely be able to tell I was still developing as a composer. I'm not telling you not to go look at them, but if you're used to what I like right now and you go back and look at those, just realize, there's going to be a huge difference. But anyway, so meeting Walter, though, I was at the convention, and one of the pieces I had played with my band was A Quiet Rain, published by Grand Mesa and written by Walter Cummings. And I just loved that piece, and it was one of those pieces that just really spoke to my band and helped us develop as musicians. So, I'm walking around this convention. I see Grand Mesa Music. I'm like, oh, hey, they published A Quiet Rain. So I go up there, and I started talking to Walter, although I didn't know it was Walter. I just never looked at his name tag. And I was just like, man, we just played this piece, and it was great. Y'all's company, does really good music. And so then, of course, I was embarrassed because, I realized I was talking to the composer. But then we had a nice conversation, and I mentioned to him, I was like, well, I said, I'm a composer too, and I've written some things that, I haven't got published yet. So, would you be willing to look at them? And having been on both sides of this now, I'm sure Walter was just like, oh, he gets asked that all the time. Like, I was not special at that point. Like, it was like, I'm sure at every convention I've been to, I always run into people who want to submit music. So, that's not very uncommon. So that I mentioned it to him, and he said, oh, yeah, we'll look at, stuff, so, please send it. So I sent, about a few months later, I sent them 3 pieces. I sent them Fields of Clover, Pandora, and this piece that has still not been published. It's a march I wrote called Hillside March, which I really like, but it just hasn't been published yet. But anyway, I sent them all 3 pieces, and actually out of all of them, I thought Fields of Clover would be the least likely to get accepted because it starts with a clarinet choir, and that was, kind of unusual at the time. And anyway, to make a long story short, that was the one that got picked. And so he called me, a couple months later and said, hey, we'd like to publish this. And so we got the contract signed and everything. And, I think whenever you get something published by one publisher, it's a little easier to, or at least maybe you get a little more consideration, like when you submit something again. So I, kept submitting things to it, got a few things published. I'd start getting a couple things published per year, and then it just kind of snowballed. So that, chance meeting at a band director convention definitely changed the trajectory of my life and career.
So, Randall, let's talk about sort of when you began to sort of hit, I don't know how I want to say this, but you sort of started to achieve sort of more mainstream success. And you mentioned Afterburn and Adrenaline Engines as 2 pieces that sort of triggered that. What stands out about that in those pieces that caused that?
Well, the big thing was just the sales. And I hate to de-romanticize composing too much, but there is the business aspect of it. And, so, to give your listeners some context and, at least from what I've been made to understand, the band market is really not that big. And so, if a piece gets published and it sells between 300 to 400 copies, that's considered pretty successful. So that's considered a successful piece of music. It was a worthwhile investment for the company. But Afterburn, like in its first year out, sold like between 1,500 to 2,000 copies. And so, that was pretty, especially like for Grand Mesa, that was pretty unheard of. And so it was just one of those things, like it definitely got people's attention. And then of course, anytime you have something that sounds like that and it's being programmed, people are hearing your music, and people responded really positively to that piece. And so then Adrenaline Engines came out and it sold even more. It was just it was kind of like it just put me on people's radar for, hey, we're going to look for this guy's music.
People start looking for your name as opposed to like waiting for it to come to them.
It can be a good thing and a bad thing because the only unfortunate thing about that is that, both of those pieces were, fast, energetic concert openers, which isn't a bad, now that's not a bad thing. I love writing that style, but that's not all I write. And so there was that perception for a little while that, everything that Standridge writes is a, big, loud, percussive, fast, adrenaline heavy type thing. And that wasn't the case at all, which was, if you think like, my very first piece published was Fields of Clover, it's this basically Scottish ballad, and so there, it's funny how different directors and different clients will get this perception of you, but it's only based on their experience and what they're familiar with, as opposed to the reality of what you do.
Jack Stamp talked about this because he's known as the overture, the fanfare guy because of Gavorkna.
No, I can commiserate. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I'm curious as a composer and someone who I don't write a lot of music. You and I have talked about this before, but how long did it take you before you began to sort of see some critical mass?
Like in what way do you mean?
Like before you started to see sales really go up and people began to know your name and see your name and sort of like immediately look at them.
I think if I remember right, I think Afterburn and Adrenaline Engines came out in my 5th and 6th years as a composer with Grand Mesa. And I'd been composing before that. Like I said, I'd had some things published with another company. And I've been directing for a while. So, it took a while. And of course, everybody's experience is going to vary. Because like my reputation and my, experience was totally based on people actually buying my music and playing it. I know that may sound like, oh, well, everybody's like that, but it's not. If you get, somebody that like wins a big composition contest, and suddenly they're on everybody's radar, and I'm not knocking that at all. That's great exposure. Or if you've got somebody who is more based in academia and they've got a very high profile wind ensemble conductor that is promoting their music all over the place. That's you'll get that, but like mine was totally from the ground up. I like to tell people, like, seriously, I have no gimmick. Like there is no gimmick about music. I am a middle-aged Southern white guy, with, I'm not from an Ivy League school. I'm not from a film composing background. I'm not, nothing like that. Like literally all I have is my music, and that's all I have to offer you. I don't have any other type of interesting thing,
Well, it's interesting that you bring up because there are so many different ways that people can sort of find fame and find success as a composer in the band world, and they're all valid. They're all just different kind of things. Is what you're serving.
Oh yeah. I wasn't being snarky about it.
No.
Yeah, to me, I'm seriously like, it's like any way you can get your music out there, you should.
So Randall, can you tell me about Grand Mesa Marching?
Okay, well, as I mentioned, I've been writing for marching band basically since 1997. I started writing for marching band when I was still in college, so I've been doing it a long time, and I've been doing it in a lot of different ways, and this is all important to Grand Mesa Marching. So, just to kind of explain my philosophy, the types of schools that I write for everything from people that just do Friday night marching band and they just want to be entertaining, all the way to, avant-garde, Bands of America style, shows, and pretty much everything in between, because there is a lot of overlap. But if I had to pick like my favorite, my whole philosophy about marching band is that I want the audience to be entertained, and I want the students to be engaged. So, I did a lot of writing for my own band, and what I would see just over and over going to contest after contest is you'd have these really large bands with these great designs and really great music, and then you'd have these smaller or more moderate sized bands that would be doing these specialty shows, like from composers that are known for the grade 4 and 5, and that's all I'll say about that. And but the younger stuff, there's no nice way to say it. It was just boring. And it was also ill suited for that type of ensemble because, like, if you've only got 4 trumpets and the trumpets are playing from the beginning of the show to the end of the show, that's a problem. Because fatigue is going to set in. You're going to have this thing. So there was no choir-like writing, like no brass choir versus woodwind choir versus solos and things like that, which is pretty standard with other things. It was just basically, the smaller bands were so afraid of sounding quote unquote small that their writers would just write 2D all the time. And so it was just this block scoring that was, just in your face all the time and would just totally exhaust the band. And, didn't have any musical effect, didn't have any, because it's just 2D band all the time. And so I just saw this kind of niche for there's a need for grade 1 through 3 marching band music that is written with effect in mind, that is written, for these smaller ensembles. And so that's kind of how we started. I mean, that's not all we do, but that is how we started, was by focusing on that level. And we wanted the shows to be entertaining, because there's just a lot of, I'm just going to be blunt, I think a lot of marching band shows are interesting, but they don't do a lot for me. I want to be entertained. And of course, entertainment can take a lot of forms. I mean, there's, pathos, there's, excitement, there's humor, there's sorrow, there's lots of different flavors of entertainment, but it does have to be emotionally affecting in some way. It can't just be, oh, well, here's a chord, here's this, here's whatever. There has to be some kind of excitement to the show and to the music. And so that's kind of what we focused on. And that part of the company has just exploded. Our sales have just gone through the roof, and people seem to really be responding to our product. And I mean, I'm not the only writer for the Grand Mesa Marching. I would say our other main writer is a gentleman named Jason Nitch. And he's a really good writer. He's got some great shows out. And we've also published quite a few things by another Arkansas composer, Jeremy Doss. Also, we've got one by a Carolina composer, Dustin Hoke, a really good show. We just published a show by Tony Suzy. We've also got one by David Herring. And I know I'm probably forgetting somebody off the top of my head, but so we've got other writers.
John Pasternak.
All the guys are. Oh yeah! Oh, thank you. Yeah, we just like brand new. One of our new shows is John Pasternak's Storm Chaser, which is a really cool show. So it's starting to grow, and we're each year selecting the shows that we actually release has gotten more difficult because it's fairly competitive. We don't release like as many shows as we possibly can every year. We narrow it down to between 10 to 12 shows that we can manage and really quality control. And, that's all we release every year. And, I think the product speaks for itself. We're very proud of it, and people seem to like it. We've had a ton of return business every year, and it just seems to grow.
Yeah, no, I brought up John because John was episode 1 of this show.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and thank you for looking at it, because my brain's just gone at this point.
No, it's okay. It's okay. He was the one who agreed to be my guinea pig the first episode.
I've had limited interaction with him, but all of the interactions I've had thus far with him are extremely positive.
All right, Randall. So this is a question that I know is I know the answer already, and I know that you probably have quite a waiting list for commissions, but if I were a band director out there and I wanted to get a piece by Randall Standridge, an original, what would I have to do?
Well, I mean, the first thing you would do, obviously, would be to just contact me. I'm all over social media. I've got my website. I try to make myself as available as possible to, and to be as easy to find as possible. So they would just contact me in some way, and I've been contacted. Well, some people contact me over Facebook. Some people contact me by phone, by email. At conventions, every time I go to a convention, I'll end up talking with somebody about a possible commission. So the first thing is to get in contact. And to me, the biggest thing is always just the timeline that they want. I'm a pretty fast writer, and I also have a lot of time to write because, I'm not a band director anymore, and I'm not, I'm not teaching in college. I'm not doing, so I write all day. So my schedule is pretty flexible. So I'm able to handle a pretty large volume of commissions. But I also have a strict policy that I never allow myself to take on more work that I can actually comfortably finish. Because I do firmly believe in having a good life balance. And it's really easy to get to overwork yourself. So I'm very cautious about making sure that I have downtime, that I have time to recharge and do that. But I mean, at the same token, I don't mind being busy because that's the gig. I mean, that's you want people to want you to write music. So it's kind of finding that balance there. But so anyway, we check the timeline and make sure that we have an agreeable date when it can work. Then, if they have any specific requests for the commission, like whether it's a piece in memory of someone, or if it's celebrating a certain thing, or if it's for a certain occasion where they need a certain style of music, we'll discuss that. We get all the parameters in place. We put together a contract, and then it just goes from there.
So, Randall, we need to kind of get to the final questions because we're coming up on 45 minutes. But I wanted to ask you about this new piece that you have out that's wonderful, Frogs. Can you tell me the story of how that came to be?
Well, Frogs came to be from my parents go on lots of cruises, and actually me and Steve do too. Incidentally, all you listeners out there, if you want the best vacation in the world besides Disney World, go on a cruise. My parents go on cruises a lot, and my mom likes to bring me back things. And so for one of these cruises, she brought me back a frog guiro, which is just a guiro shaped like a frog. And you scrape it, and it makes this croaking sound that sounds eerily exactly like a frog. She brought me back that, and I had it in my office. I was kind of playing with it. Around the same time, I am a huge Percy Grainger fan. My favorite, one of my top 5 favorite pieces of all time is Molly on the Shore. I mean, so much so that I have a dog named Molly, and I call her Molly on the Floor. Anyway, so around the same time, I was listening to a lot of Grainger, kind of studying some of his scores and kind of examining his compositional style. And the thought occurred to me that I was just like, Percy Grainger never wrote a grade 1. He never did. That just wasn't what he did. And so just as kind of this mental exercise, I was like, well, if Percy Grainger wrote a grade 1, what would that even be like? What would be the elements of it? What of Grainger's style could you do, but do it at a grade 1 level? And so I was thinking about this, and around the same time I was messing with this frog thing, and the ideas just kind of got intermeshed. And so the piece Frogs is really an exploration of Percy Grainger's style done grade 1 with frog guiro. And if that sounds insane, most of my ideas are, so I don't take that personally. But the piece turned out really well. So, like, from Grainger's style, we included some easy chromaticism, descending, which is kind of typical with Grainger stuff. At least to my ear, he seemed to favor descending chromaticism versus ascending. And so we have some of that in there with dance rhythms. The piece is very joyful, and it definitely sounds like a country dance. Unusual harmonic and rhythmic cadential points, and taking and start phrase beginnings like kind of in the middle of when the phrase should end. So we took some of those things and some of the color scoring that he would do, and just wrote this grade 1 piece. And it doesn't sound like anything else I've written, but I actually think that's exciting because I don't want to write the same thing over and over, So no, it came out. It's funny because it came out I had 2 pieces come out this year that I was really excited about. There was that one and this other piece called The 9, and they could not be more different. Because Frogs is very joyful. It's a grade 1. It's humorous and happy. And then The 9 is very dark and dramatic, and it's grade 4+, super serious piece. But that to me is part of the fun of composing, is just exploring all those sides of your personality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a terrific piece. That really caught my eye this year.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and of course, Vandercook just played it at the Midwest Clinic, and they really captured the lightheartedness and humor of it. The performance was absolutely fantastic. And incidentally, that piece was also a consortium. I put it together through Facebook. And if you look at the program notes, there were over 100 schools that participated in this consortium, because the way I did it, I just put out a notice like, hey, I'm going to write a grade 1 piece. Here are the parameters. And if you're interested in participating in this consortium, And I had some extra things I was going to, the people that participated, I was going to send them frog guiros, a couple for their program. Plus, I did a whole video series detailing how I wrote the piece, the first draft, the second draft, like my styles goes through this big detailed series. So I felt like they were going to get a lot, but I was honestly only expecting 10 to 12 schools maybe. So I put the notice on Facebook, and within 2 hours we had over 100 participants. And because you know how different people see things at different times on Facebook, I didn't feel good about telling somebody, no, you can't be in this. So what I did is I just disclosed to everybody, this is the number of schools that have said they're interested. If that makes you not want to do this, I totally understand. So at this point, it's your choice. If you want to continue with this, that's fine. If you don't, I'm not going to be put out or angry in any way. And I got a couple people pulled out, but the large majority stuck with it. And it just turned into this really big thing. I was able to communicate and interact with so many directors, and kind of help to show them that, at least for me, I can't speak for other composers, but for me, I take grade 1 music just as seriously as I take my grade 4, 5, and 6 stuff, and show them that there is a process behind it. It's not just sit down and write whatever. And so it was just a really, really positive experience educationally for me, and all the response I got from the participating schools was very positive. And so it was just a neat experience. I actually ended up writing another piece for the because there were so many schools. I felt kind of guilty about having these schools and only writing one piece. So I actually ended up writing a second piece, for the consortium, and just gave it to them as part of the package deal. And I wrote it in March based on the Itsy Bitsy Spider. It's just called March of the Arachnids. It's not based on any Grainger stuff. That one is pure Randall Standridge. But it was fun too, and so it was just a really, really neat experience.
All right, Randall. So I ask a group of questions of all my guests, kind of as a common reference point for everyone I talk to for the show. And the first of these is, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
I think for me, the line is just in the philosophy of the approach. If the goal of the competition is to simply raise your own bar of excellence, I think it's very healthy. I think because, being competitive is just part of the human spirit. That's just part of our nature as people, or so I believe. But I think if you're competing with a standard, if your competition is just to make yourself as good as you can possibly be, then I think it's very healthy. I do not think that, purposely, we're going to beat that school, or we're going to beat, we want them to lose. That is when I think it becomes very unhealthy. It's not healthy socially. It's not healthy psychologically, because if your goal is to beat other people, then there's always going to be somebody better, and you're never going to be satisfied. Whereas I believe if you're trying to achieve a certain level of excellence, you can achieve that, and you can certainly expect more after that. But it's when your goals are based totally on excellence, you are in control of your success or failure 100%. But if your goal is based on beating another school, you may give 110%. Everything you could possibly give, and you may raise your excellence, but you may still not beat that other school. And then, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment and failure, or at least the potential for it. And so to me, it's all in the philosophy and the goals in which competition is approached.
So, Randall, you've brought up Steve a few times, and you talked about vacation. How do you achieve a work-life balance?
How do I achieve a work-life balance? Well, the first thing is just, prioritizing. If I had to say what is the number one most valuable thing in the world, hands down, it is time. For me and my personal philosophy, time is at the root of everything. For instance, love. For me, love is just an expression of time. If you agree to spend your time with somebody because you love them, it's like the ultimate gift you can give them. When people say, I'm going to spend my life with you, they're pledging their time to you. And time to me is very valuable. And so it's the way I achieve balance is I just prioritize, what do I want to spend time on? So I'm pretty strict about how much I will allow myself to work within a day. I do have a quitting time every day, like when I could be in the middle of a project and I stop then because it's time to stop. It's time to go have family time. It's time to go hang out with Steve. It's time to go play with my dogs. It's time to go play video games. It's time to do something besides music. So I think finding that balance has to be a conscious choice. It's not something that's going to happen by accident. I found that out the hard way early in my career because I was letting work and composing everything get out of hand, and it was just eating up all of my time. And so I'm just very conscious of how much time I'm spending on things. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, I'm very cautious about taking on too many jobs, because that's one thing I've seen that's unfortunately very common in the marching arts is you get these designers that will just take on an ungodly number of clients that they really can't handle. And it becomes a personal problem. They're disappointing their clients, or disappointing the people that are personally in their lives. And so you just have to be aware of that and make that decision not to do that.
All right, Randall, this is a big question. What are the challenges facing music education, and how can we best meet them?
So what are the challenges facing music education? For me personally, I just feel the biggest challenge at this point is finding a way to continue to make acoustic, I don't know if it's weird, but to make acoustic music relevant in a digital world. I think that is a huge challenge right now because, we've got so much competing for kids' attention right now. We've got, since the digital world has become part of our everyday world, it's just the competition for attention has just exploded. And so I think we've got to learn to adapt our art form and our expectations to that world. And I think a lot of directors are doing a really good job of this. One of the things that I've enjoyed seeing is so many concerts and performances that have been live streamed, or they've been put on YouTube or whatever, because you're able to reach you may have a parent or whatever that's not able to be at a concert, but they can just enjoy their child's performance. And, that's one small way of making, a digital change in the way we perceive music. Allowing students to create content, which is a big thing right now. One thing that I've enjoyed about the digital revolution is it has really empowered creative minds across the world, because there's a need and a want for all this content and media for us to produce. And I think that if we empower our music students to do that and show them that they can do this with acoustic instruments, combined with digital technology, I think that's going to be really powerful and a good way to show them how to express themselves in this new, digital world that we're living in.
All right, Randall. So this is a question that I really like, and that's, what advice would you give your younger self, perhaps your 18-year-old self at your high school graduation?
So what advice would I give myself? Well, the first thing would be you need to start at the gym a lot earlier than in your 40s. Actually the 30s, but you get the idea. I would definitely say, take better care of your physical health. I'm not in bad health at all, but it's just, that's something that I wish I would have been more conscious of then. As far as music goes, I wish I would have learned to be more patient with the process early on. I've become very patient with my composing and and even my musical practicing processes now. I've developed an almost Zen type patience about it. But when I was younger, I was very impatient, and I just wish I had that insight earlier.
All right, Randall, I don't ask this question to be morbid. I ask it more about what piece has moved you the most or is most meaningful to you. And that's, if you had the choice to conduct or to listen to or to interact with one piece as the last one, what might that be?
The very last piece I would want to conduct. And I'm not going to choose one of my own, because that would be too self-serving. But if I had to pick one piece to end my life, and this maybe sound like an odd one to choose, but for me it would be Fantasy Variations on a Theme by Paganini by James Barnes. Because I feel like, well, first of all, I think that piece is extremely underappreciated. I'm always shocked that how people don't even know that piece. But especially being a composer myself, I think that piece is one that every composer should experience and study, because it covers almost every style you can imagine, every color combination you can imagine. It is one of the most singularly creative things I have ever heard in my life. And I mean, and then on top of that, it's just a wildly entertaining piece of music. And so that would be a good one to go out on, because you'd get to experience the full range of concert band composing just all in one piece.
All right, Randall. So you said that you didn't want to mention one of yours because it'd be self-serving, but I'm going to ask you directly as a composer, what piece, if someone was listening and didn't know Randall Standridge, and there's probably not many of those, what would you tell them to listen to?
Oh, well, that's easy. That piece I mentioned earlier, the piece The Nine.
The Nine?
Which is written in celebration of the 60th anniversary of the integration of Little Rock Central High School. Some of your listeners might be familiar with the Little Rock Nine, the Little Rock Central Nine, as they've come to be known, which were 9 African American students who were to be integrated into Little Rock Central High School shortly after the Brown versus the Board of Education decision. The Arkansas governor activated the National Guard unit to prevent them from going in, and then the federal government took over the unit, and they then escort the students in. And aside from that, it was just this big clashing moment during the civil rights movement between progress and opposition to progress. And so, being an Arkansas native, I was very honored when they asked me to write the piece. And also, I mean, I'm not going to make any bones about it, I'm very much a social progressive. Issues of equality are very near and dear to my heart, and I strongly believe in them. And so, being able to express that in a piece, was really gratifying. Also, it's the other thing is, I'm not going to lie, I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about the way people perceive me as a composer, because I am typically thought of as being like a younger band composer, which, and don't get me wrong, I love writing for younger bands, but what I like about this piece is I feel like it really demonstrates that I am capable of doing much, much more than that and being successful at it.
Sure.
So if they hadn't listened to that one, that would be the one I'd want them to check out.
I totally get that. Yeah, that piece, that topic especially. My mother was a big Norman Rockwell fan. She was an artist. And we had this gigantic book of Norman Rockwell paintings, like the whole anthology.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember looking at that painting, The Problem We All Live With, of the little girl in Little Rock, and just as a child, just being fascinated with that picture. And that's how I kind of learned about that Little Rock story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was one of those moments in history where a mirror was held up to the face of the nation, and we had to look at ourselves and be like, is this the way we want to be?
All right, Randall. So you have a lot going on, and I always ask my guests if there's anything coming up they'd like to share or promote, but you have to realize that the podcast will probably be available for years. So it could be a long time that this exists.
Okay. No worries. Well, as of right now, the biggest thing I've got coming up is I made a decision about a month ago that I'm going to, kind of related to the chip on the shoulder that I just mentioned. I'm going to start self-publishing some of my more advanced works just to make them more available, because I think in the past I've just been kind of waiting too much on my publishing houses to kind of start wanting to publish my more advanced things, but I decided to just take that decision and that power out of their hands, as it were. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I've got a great relationship with all my publishing houses, but I'm still going to continue to publish my younger band works for them. But some of the more advanced things I'm going to publish. Plus, I've got this consortium I'm going to be putting together over the next year for 2020. It's going to be directly related to my more advanced music and a recording project that I'm going to be putting together. So details are not totally together at this point, but the bottom line is I'm going to be writing some really advanced stuff, looking for groups to sponsor them, and then using the proceeds of the consortium to create an album.
So Randall, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm all over social media, so that's one way. I do have a website, www.randallstandridge.com, that has a contact page there. Those are probably the best ways. Yeah, I'm not hard to find. Perfect.
Randall, thanks so much. I'm honored that you would be on the show, and I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, and thank you for all the great questions. I hope it was informative.